Okay. Yeah, I just want to start this morning by echoing the uh, the opinions of the people who presented before me. I think that's pretty disgusting that you would not consider deaths by a department as relevant to the budget. If any other department of the city was responsible for multiple deaths a year, that would absolutely be considered in their budget presentations. So I don't see how it's not relevant to the budget. Their names should be allowed to be said in the council floor, and you should all have to face the names and preferably the families of the people that the police have murdered. The proposed 2021 budget is insufficient, disappointing, and without vision. It clearly shows that Mayor Bowman and council are uninterested and unwilling to listen to the concerns of constituents and take the steps needed to invest in services that constituents need most, steps that are crucial to improving the quality of life in our city. In short, this budget tells constituents that their priorities are not valued and that this current municipal government, and that's a huge problem. More people participated in the budget consultations last year than ever before. It's clear that Winnipeggers care deeply and want to have a say in how their tax dollars are being spent. The three most important services identified were medical response, community livability, and public transit. The three least important services were golf services, parking, and the police. 50% of respondents marked the police as not important or not important at all. Yet the big winners in this proposed budget have been roads and the police. The proposed budget will see the total WPS operating budget increase by $8.5 million. This increase is to the direct detriment of many other vital life-sustaining City of Winnipeg departments. The operating budget for the public transit is being cut by $7.8 million, despite the need to increase service to reduce overcrowding. This proposal represents a clear and conscious decision by City Council to further criminalize Winnipeggers rather than reorient their policy priorities towards building robust social and community services that address the root causes of poverty and ensure safety for all. Dozens of research papers, expert testimony, and the lived experience of millions of people confirm the same thing. Investing heavily in police and prisons make communities less safe. The police provide little value to our city in any sense of the word. They show up only after danger, harm, or violence has occurred, and even then they aren't even very good at bringing justice. In 2019, property crimes made up the vast majority of offenses investigated by police, almost 3 times more than all other types of crime combined. The average clearance rate for property crime was 14%, and the average clearance rate for all crime was 30%. That means when Winnipeggers call the police, 2/3 of the time, nothing happens except a waste of taxpayer dollars that could have gone to providing life-sustaining services that address the root causes of crime. 80% of calls police respond to are identified as not traditional police work, meaning they don't require an armed response. Police are not best trained to deal with them, and they do so at a much higher cost than professionals who are actually trained to do so. The police budget has grown approximately 163% since 2000, and these investments have not contributed to community safety. Instead, funding police services to exorbitant levels has proliferated crime by channeling resources away from social services and communities and continuing to further inequity. I'm aware of the Harvard-Bloomberg study that is aiming to move non-urgent 911 calls away from police to other first responders that EPC discussed on November 18th. However, without actually reducing the police budget, this is putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Crime does not appear in a vacuum, nor is it the result of moral failing on the part of individuals. It is the result of communities being deprived of resources, the result of people not being able to meet their basic needs. After the historic Justice for Black Lives protest this summer, Chief Smythe claimed that the budget of police, social services, and other community services are not mutually exclusive. But this argument rings hollow, considering community services have historically borne the brunt of budget cuts, while police spending and wages have risen faster than inflation. There are clearly 2 sets of rules in Winnipeg, one for police and another for all other city workers. Winnipeg's police budget has soared over the last 2 decades. In 2021, $313 million total spending for the WPS will represent 26.5% of the city's total tax-supported expenditures. Winnipeg spends spends the most of its budget on policing of 15 major cities across Canada. Last year, 31% of the average annual municipal property tax bill was spent on policing, compared to 19% on community services, recreation, and parks, and only 8% on the transit subsidy. It is important to note that most of the police budget goes towards salaries, benefits, and pensions for officers, due to the especially strong collective bargaining agreements won by the Winnipeg Police Association. While the city has demonstrated that it is more than willing to lay off and renegotiate contracts for transit and community service workers due to COVID-19 conditions, the Winnipeg Police continue to graduate new officers into its ranks and hire new cadets. Between January and September, the WPS vastly increased their foot patrol hours and hours spent on transit, even though transit ridership and foot traffic downtown have fallen drastically since the start of the pandemic. Such needless policing helped lead to a $4 million increase in salaries and benefits above the projected budget for 2020. The Winnipeg Police continue to act with impunity, facing no budgetary consequences for their ever-growing harms and financial overruns. Every other City of Winnipeg department has faced layoffs and service cuts throughout the pandemic, but the Winnipeg Police continue unscathed and are continually rewarded rather than punished. Council's addiction to continually funding the things that bring the least value to our city, specifically roads and police, is literally bankrupting our city, making life worse for our city's most vulnerable, You can only blame the province and the feds for not giving the city enough money for so long. Eventually, you either have to admit that you don't care or actually listen to what communities are saying, defund the police, invest in transit, invest in active transportation, the arts, libraries, public housing, and other life-sustaining services that actually bring value and quality of life to our city. We're in the midst of a global pandemic, a worsening climate crisis, an economic downturn, and significant social upheaval promises. As leaders and representatives of our communities, you have a choice on how your legacies will be reflected upon. You can stay in the pockets of Manitoba Heavy Construction, True North, and the police, dig our city further into debt, climate inaction, and inequity, or you can be part of the solution that actually chooses to make a change for the better by investing in things that make our communities more livable, vibrant, and by investing in things that are important to your constituents. I'm asking the Winnipeg Police Board to require the Winnipeg Police to hold 10% of their budget in reserve this year so it can be returned as a surplus and reinvested into community services and supports. I'm also asking that the Police Board implement a hiring freeze and not replace officers when they retire. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friesen, for your presentation. Councillor Mays, you have a question?
Yeah, and again, the usual, well, our disclaimer here, we ask questions. We're not trying to bully people. We're not trying to intimidate. You have the right to present. I have the right to ask. You have the right to respond. It's part of the democratic process here. Thank you for, and I was a bit surprised the first two speakers didn't raise it, so thank you for raising the budget consultation that was done and the results that are printed in the budget book. You cite them correctly. That is what they say. It's not a survey in any technical sense or statistically valid sense. It is an online questionnaire that was done, and those results are what you said, which was, if you look at that, you would say, oh, the public is saying the third least important service in the city is police. In fact, if you look at the not important at all number, the police actually are even higher than the parking authority on that, which would make only golf less important. So what do we know about that? Well, if you look at the appendices, which aren't published as part of the budget, that would also be a fair observation. The appendices talk about who responded, and I have to say the city is divided into 35 different postal codes. So on average, then each one should have about 3% of the respondents. Well, 10% of the respondents came from one postal code, R3G, which is Wolseley. So there wasn't a great geographic spread to the respondents. And only 19% of the respondents were over age 55 versus, if you actually were statistically sampling the population, it's 37% of the adult population of Winnipeg is over 55. So your comments are absolutely an accurate reflection of that questionnaire. What the questionnaire isn't is a statistically valid survey. So are you aware of?
I'm not hearing a question here, Councillor Mays. Where's your question?
Yeah, I'll get to a question. The question is, are you aware of the other surveys that we have done in the last, well, part of the budget, volume one, page 3-5 talked about a 75% satisfaction rate with the police among the citizens. So are you aware of that survey?
Yeah, I'm aware there's other surveys. I was speaking to the one that was in the budget document that I had access to.
Okay, and additionally, the police board had done a survey in 2019, hired outside survey company, statistically valid survey, page 13. Citizens regard all types of police activities as valid and important. So you would agree, you're right, that the budget consultation that was presented in the budget shows one thing, but the statistically valid surveys done in 2020 and 2019 suggest that, at least in other surveys, people regard all types of police activities as valid and important.
Yeah, we all know you can manipulate statistics and data to show whatever narrative you want, but I think what this reinforces that when the city solicited the constituents, the people who chose to come and express their opinion, who elected to express themselves, that they wanted to have their voice heard about their priorities, they wanted to see in this budget, that they came out and said, we don't want more police. And that's been backed up by expert data. It was mentioned by myself and Dr. Dobchuk Land before me, that the expert opinion and the evidence-based data, along with the lived experience of marginalized people, backs up that policing does not help to make communities safer, and it provides no value to our city, and it results in more deaths than it does result in safety.
And you're, I guess, aware too that the question I asked Dr. Lamb, which was, as reported in that survey last year, 25% of respondents under the age of 35 thought the service was underfunded, and 53% of respondents over age 55 thought the service was underfunded. So I hear what you're saying. What's printed in the budget reflects a certain result, but we certainly have had other surveys in the past year that have suggested a differing view from the people who responded to those surveys. You're aware of that result from the other survey?
I'm aware of that, but it's your job as elected officials to take the combined opinion of your constituents and also consult with experts and consult on what's actually going to be effective and make policy out of that. So what we're seeing is the overwhelming expert opinion and the lived experience of the people who interact with the police most often is showing that it makes them less safe. It results in people's deaths. It results in broken communities. It is the result of the city choosing to continually value certain people's lives over other people's lives.
Okay, a final question, I think. I mean, you accurately cite the result that's printed in the budget, that the group that responded said police was the third least important service behind insect control, among other things. I guess, and as I've said, only 19% of the respondents there are over age 55. Survey the previous year said, hey, there's quite a split between people under 35 and people over 55 in terms of how they would perceive the funding, whether it's underfunding or not. So I guess I'm just trying to ask you, I mean, obviously different age groups seem to have a different view, and if you underweight one age group in your budget consultations, you're going to get a certain set of results. I think there is quite a difference here between perceptions among different age groups. At least that's what the data from last year would show. And obviously we are seriously underweighting anyone over 55, that share of the population in our budget consultation. So I guess I'm aware of your view, it's obviously clear, but from our perspective, I'm just trying to make clear, you're saying, look, your survey shows it's not important, fair comment. I'm saying, look, our other surveys show a different view on that and difference yet between different age groups.
Again, this speaks to the the way that statistics, you can tell any story you want. When you ask the right people the right question, you can tell any story you want with statistics. But what the expert opinion says, researched evidence-based data, and the lived experience of the people who interact with the police most, the police are violent, they kill people. It does not create safety for anyone. It creates the perception of safety, but ultimately it removes resources and funds from communities, and it's a deliberate a choice on the half of the city to say, we like that these certain people feel safe because of the police, and we don't care that these other people are actually not safe because we keep funding the police, which is what the expert data shows.
I'm good.
Thank you, Councillor Mays. In the context of what you're stating, who are you defining as the experts?
Well, criminologists like Dr. Dobchuk Land, many other researchers, criminologists, sociologists, psychologists on the study of who study the effects of police on society. The overwhelming opinion is that they do not help create safety. People who have literally dedicated their lives to studying the police and studying how their effect on society, that is what it shows.
Yeah, and there are other criminologists who provide a different perspective on policing as well. Understandably. Thank you for your presentation this morning.